Okay, now we're going to learn some basic navigation, basically getting from one activity to another. So before I do that, we're going to do something that makes things a little simpler. So this relative layout is very cool because you can have apps that look good on multiple devices. But for what we're doing, we're going to change this relative layout to an absolute layout. It's just going to make things a lot easier for our purposes. So notice down here we have a design and text. Now let's look at the design for a second. See how it says hello world and it has sort of a blue background? Okay, now text. This is what's called an XML file. You may be familiar with HTML, right? It has a lot of these tags on one end and the other and stuff in between. And it helps, like on HTML on the web, helps basically design the layout of websites. Well, this is designing the layout of your phone screen, okay, of your activity. So if I look here, look, we have something called a text view. All right, and the text view has text that says hello world. Okay, and what I did there was I just kind of expanded it. That's actually saying that it's in this folder. We're not going to worry about that for now. It's got some things also, like it says Android. I'm going to put these sort of in a column so we can see a little better. It says layout width, wrap content, layout height, wrap content. So basically, when it's wrap content, it's just saying, well, make the width and the height of this text view. It just wraps that text view. And you can see if I click on it, it just wraps that text view. Okay, so back to here, let's make this absolute layout. Now, one thing you're gonna see that's gonna make things a lot easier is Android has this great auto-fill or auto-complete feature. So for instance, watch this. I'm just gonna double click this and highlight this relative layout. When I start, look, I type an A and it already has all these things that I might wanna put in there. Now you have to know what's allowed in there, but look, there's what I was going for, absolute layout. So I'm gonna click that. And it also changed this closing tag to absolute layout too. Now it has a line through it. Don't worry about that for now, not a big deal. Okay, so once we go through absolute layout 2, we can get rid of, let me just get these all on the same line so we can kind of see what we're working with here. Once we put it in absolute layout, we don't need any of this padding. See, padding left, padding right, padding top, padding bottom. Just go ahead and delete everything except you don't want to delete this tools file, okay? And Android background, this was the color that we added. So it added an XML component. So anything you do here in design will show up over here in the XML file. So let me go back here, design. So let me just, for instance, let me drag and drop a button here. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a second, but look, oh, boom, all of a sudden I have a button in my XML file. What happens if I delete that here? Oh, my button's gone too. So the text and design, these are two different ways of looking and editing and controlling and customizing the exact same thing. So now I'm gonna add a button because if we want to go to the next screen, we're gonna do that by clicking on a button. Anything over here in the palette, right? Think of this as the canvas, and this is your palette, okay? And I can just drag and drop anything from here over to here. So if I take a button, and I put it right there, and I have my new button. Okay, so there are some different things you can do to the button. So for instance, we can double click here and we can change what it says. So maybe I want this button to say, go to next screen. All right, go to next screen. Notice how the button automatically resized to fit this? That's because the button is set to wrap content, okay? I could set this to an absolute value, like say 100, right? And this could be 200, okay? But for now, let's just keep this on wrap content and wrap content. Let's talk about the idea of padding and margins. So here's a button, and the padding is the difference basically between the contents and the edge of the button. The margin is the difference between the frame, right, the edge of the button, and this thing called the bounding box, all right? One way that I think about this is the margin is kind of like your bubble or your personal space. So if anyone ever says, whoa, man, you're standing in my bubble, you know, you're like too much in my space, well, then you can tell that person, well, you need to increase your margins, right? Because if your margins were bigger, then I wouldn't even be able to do that. So this is the bubble. This is the bubble of personal space. So if you added another element to this, it would have to sort of stand off by this amount. Okay? So just for fun here, let's see what happens if we change the padding. Now notice in our properties, everything over here is in alphabetical order. So that kind of helps us to do this. So if I do padding left, let's make it 20. See how I moved that over there? Let's make it 40. Oop. See? Okay, same thing from the top. So see, it's from the contents to the edge here. Okay, and we can also do things like we change the background color of this screen. We can go here and we can change the background color of the button too, right? We click here, find background. All right, and we can change the color, right? Okay, and that'll change that. We can do a whole host of things, right? We can go down here and change the text alignment, text appearance, text color, all kinds of different things. We're not going to worry about that for right now. We can also go in here and add an image to our background. Okay, so now we need another screen to go to. So we're going to create a new blank activity. So in order to do that, go to main over here. Okay, always create your new blank activities from this main. You're going to right click on main and it's going to give you these options. You're going to go new activity, blank activity. And it's going to ask you to name this, right? This should look very familiar to when you first started up the Android program and named your first activity. So we'll call this second activity, okay? And I'm going to finish. And we have another blank activity. Okay, let's set this to absolute layout. Okay, so let's set this to absolute layout, right? So we do that by going here to text. We're going to do this by looking at the HTML. So if you remember, I'll just highlight the relative layout. As soon as I click A, B, we've already got absolute layout here. I'm going to push return. And that's going to do that. Now remember, we need to get rid of all the stuff that has to do with padding. So again, let me just kind of push, I'm just pushing return just to kind of get this in a line so I can see what I got. So width and height, I definitely need that. I don't need padding. Left, right, top, bottom. I don't need any of that padding. I do want to make sure I keep this tools context thing. So I'm going to delete that. Okay, I'm going to go back to the design. And I want to give this one a little different background. So the first one was kind of a blue color. Let's make this one sort of a, I don't know, what do you want? Green? We'll make this a light green. Okay. So when you have multiple activities, it's really easy to go back and forth between them. So if we go over here to this layout file, this represents our different activities. So if I double click on this first activity, I'll go back to my first activity. Second, okay? And so let's go back to the first activity and hook up this button so it transitions us to that next slide, okay? So when I select this button, I'm going to go down here and this on click, see here it says on click. I'm going to give that a name. That's going to be the name of the what's called a listener or an on-click listener that's going to be listening for a click on this button. So like this says on click, we usually name buttons on something. So I'm going to say on next screen. Just because I want it to be very apparent when I look at the code what this button does. Okay, so I can hit tab and that kind of locks it in there. So now notice if I go to the text here, aha, look, I see it right here added to the button has been added and the Android on click has been set to on next screen. All right, now we're going to do some Java programming. So there's a few ways to get to your Java file. If you're already in this text and you go up here to this little C right here, it says related context Java file. If you click that, that's going to take you to the Java file related to that activity, okay? Another way is in this Java folder here, right? So if I wanted to look at the Java for the second, Java for the first, there it is. And also sometimes every time you open one of these, it's going to open a new folder. And sometimes it gets a little messy up here. One thing you can do is you can right click on this and you can say close others. Okay, and that just gets it a little cleaner. Now, over here in the middle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the code necessary for my button to work. Okay, so at first this is going to seem a little unfamiliar, may seem a little like gibberish. Eventually you're going to understand what every single element in this is. But remember, this is like learning a new language. Some of the stuff in the beginning is going to be memorization. You're just going to have to do it to get it to work. And then as you keep doing it and you learn more, you're going to understand why these certain phrases, why these certain words are used, okay? So bear with me. We're going to write something like public void. And now I'm going to write my on-click listener. Remember, we named that on next screen, okay? Put parentheses. Okay, don't worry too much about that right now. All right, see these little curly braces? We have a left and a right. So that means that, and someone clicks that button, anything we write in here is going to happen. Okay, so we're going to make what's called an intent to take us to the next screen. Okay, so we have a new intent, right? What is our intent? What is our intention? Our intention is to go from the screen we're at, the activity, to the next activity. Okay, so our new intent, we're going to put the first we're going to start with the activity that we're already at. And the activity we're already at is what? It's the first activity. So I'm going to write first, F-I-R. And notice I've typed 3 letters in and it is suggesting, oh, do you mean the first activity? Yes, I do mean the first activity. All I have to do is push enter. Boom. So first activity dot this. The first activity is this activity that we are transitioning from. Okay, where are we going to? Well, we're going to the second activity. Well, look at that. 3 letters in and it's already suggesting, oh, do you mean the second activity? Yes, I do mean the second activity. Okay, and I really wanted this to be first activity dot this, second activity dot that, right? Like that would just make sense in human language, but it's not quite that nice. It says dot class, okay? Now, see this little squiggly line right here? That's telling us that something is wrong. Something is not okay in code syntax land. In Java, after you're done with a line, you have to put this semicolon. It's kind of like the computer version of putting a period. So just put that there. Okay, so now I've said what my intent is, okay? I've made a new variable that's intent I. I've said we're gonna start the first activity where we're at, and we're gonna go to the second activity. Now the only thing you have to do next is tell it to do that transition. And we're gonna use this, start activity. Okay, start activity. Well, what activity do you want me to start? Well, I want you to start this activity, right? I. So start activity I. Oh, okay, it can do that. Here's one thing that you're gonna come across a lot, and it threw me off when I first started doing the Android programming, was you get these red views, and you can see that there's squiggly lines are now being thrown up all over the place. These squiggly lines are telling us that there's something wrong somewhere, and it's trying to lead us there. Okay, so here, if you put your cursor over that and you hit Option, Return, it's going to make it okay. Option, return, everything's okay. So it's importing something. Don't worry about that. Just know if it's red like that, highlighted, for the most part, if you hit Option, return, a lot of times that's going to solve your problem. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and run this and see if everything works out. So we'll go up here. I'll click Run. Let's switch over to our Genymotion, and there we go. Okay. So if I click here, oh, there we go. Hello world. Okay, now okay. Now I'm a little bit stuck, right? I can get to the screen, but that's all we programmed it to do, so we're satisfied with that. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a back button so we can get back to our first activity after we've gone to the second activity. A lot of times when it builds, you're gonna have this window come up. If we need to collapse that to get a little more space, you can just collapse that there. All right, we're gonna go to our second activity here. I'm gonna click on, remember in layout, I click on this. That allows me to look at the design, or I can look at the XML. So now we're gonna add a button to go back. Okay, so all I have to do is drag and drop a button here. Okay, I'm gonna call this button back. Maybe I will change the background of this button to a nice color. Maybe we'll make this, say, blue. Okay, so now all we have to do is go and hook up the on-click listener to give our button functionality. So let's go down here, on-click. Let's call this on back. One thing to notice here, see how it starts off with a lowercase o, right, on, but then the B for back is uppercase? This is something we call in programming camel casing, and that's where the first letter of the first word is lowercase, but all the other words start with an uppercase, okay? It's just sort of a programming convention, and it helps keep things nice and neat. All right, so let's go to our text to make sure that the on click was added, and you know what? I don't see it here. So what that probably means is, I didn't push tab or enter, right? So it didn't register. So let me add this again. On back, tab, good. When I see this little M here, that means it's good. Let's double check this over here in the text XML. Good, on back. But I didn't use my camel casing conventions. So let's try this one more time. Okay, good, on back. Let's double check this, on back, great. Go up here, that's gonna take us to our JavaScript for that class. Okay, so most of our code is gonna go right here in the middle, right? We've got on create options, on options, and it's gonna go right here in the middle. So public void, just like the last time, and then the on click listener that we set up, which we called on back. And we set up our little curly braces. Notice when I make a left curly brace here, it automatically makes a right one. Okay, now the code we want to run is in here. Now, for this one, it's super simple. If I just write finish, and then make sure to write my period there, then that will basically go back to whatever screen it came from. Now, it's complaining again, this view is red, and I'm getting all these error squiggly underlines. So if we go here, remember what's the magic thing? We hit Option and Return, boom. That takes care of that. Okay, so now let's run the code. Okay, so go to next screen. There we go. Back. Woohoo.